A devoted father strives to find his missing wife and protect his son, who are both infected by an illness that turns humans into dangerous creatures. In a dystopian France, a genetic disease turns some individuals into animal species incapable of coexisting peacefully with humans. To manage this, authorities resort to eliminating or confining the mutants while scientists work on finding a cure. One morning, while stuck in traffic, François blames his son Émile for causing them to be late for an important appointment. Annoyed, the teenager, uninterested in coming in the first place, exits the car with his dog Albert. The disappointed father follows his son, urging him to return to the vehicle. Suddenly, a shaking ambulance on the opposite lane grabs their attention. Seconds later, its rear door bursts open, releasing a winged man who crashes into a nearby car's windshield. François immediately pulls Émile to safety as the bird-like creature attacks the medics and officers. Some feel scared while others leave their cars to capture the incident using their phones. After eliminating the pursuers, the mutant looks strangely at the trembling teenager before flying to his escape. Once the traffic clears, François and his son arrive at the hospital to see Dr. Baudois, who's treating the man's mutating wife, Lana. The man feels optimistic upon learning that his spouse is progressing well and will be transferred to another center for better care. After this, François visits his wife in the room while his son is in the waiting area, touching the scratches on the wall. When it's Émile's turn to see his mom, he hesitates because she is the cause of the scar on his face. In response, his father reminds him that Lana is still a part of their family. Hearing this, the teenager agrees to approach and greet his mother. When she turns her head, he sees her face has changed drastically, now covered in fur. Days pass, and the father and his son temporarily move to the south to be closer to Lana's new facility. There, Émile enrolls in a new school where he meets a hyperactive Nina, who constantly questions him about his background. To hide his true situation, the teenager lies, stating that his mom has passed away and he got his facial scar from lightning. After school, Émile heads to the bar where his dad works. François then introduces his son to his colleagues Jacques, who hates mutants, and Naima, who's compassionate towards them. That night, a storm causes a power interruption inside the house, prompting François to fix the issue. Émile then awakens and gazes outside the window, only to see a mutant looking at him. However, it suddenly disappears when the power returns. The next morning, François receives terrible news. The ambulance transporting Lana and other mutants to the center crashed into a lake due to the heavy storm. Arriving at the area, the father panics upon seeing the soaked vehicle and the floating body of a lifeless mutant, fearing that his wife didn't survive. Soon, Officer Julia speaks with him, informing him that 40 mutants, including Lana, are still missing. This information immediately relieves the man, hopeful that his spouse is still alive. A desperate François hangs his clothes that night, believing his wife will pick up the scent and find her way back to them. In his gym class the following day, the teacher assigns Émile to be on the weaker tug-of-war team. When his teammates fall, the teenager manages to stay and pull the rope alone, ultimately leading to their victory. Amazed by Émile's strength, Victor invites him to a party. However, the teenager immediately excuses himself when he notices something different on his nail. Arriving home, he uses tweezers to pull something stuck under his nail, only to discover that it's a small claw. Facing the mirror, he checks his body and notices his protruding spine, making him realize he's mutating too. Frustrated, Émile throws the things and hops on the tub to aggressively rub the disease off his skin. Witnessing this, Albert joins his owner, comforting him with his licks. Meanwhile, at the supermarket, François runs into Julia, who informs him that the government has stopped their search operation and sent the military instead. Their conversations interrupted when a customer shrieks due to a mutant's presence in the area. As Julia orders the people to evacuate, François searches for the creature in the seafood section, believing it's Lana. However, it turns out to be a hungry squid mutant. In a panic, the creature rushes to escape, accidentally knocking the man down. Julia then goes after the mutant, who throws grocery items at her during the chase. Despite this, the officer manages to capture her in the end. Meanwhile, François finds a winged mutant under the vegetable section. However, he doesn't tell the cops about his discovery. Later, when the man's about to drive home, Julia approaches, thanking him for his civic actions earlier. However, she warns him not to go to the forest upon noticing that his purchases are mostly camping items. The next morning, François invites Émile to help him search for Lana in the woods the next day. However, it only leads to an argument because the teenager already made plans. The following night, Émile attends Victor's party where his classmate, Maëlle, shares her encounter with a mutant roaming around town. Hearing this, the slowly mutating teenager suddenly feels dizzy and falls off his chair. When Nina offers him a tablet, he strangely licks her hand. Others start laughing, thinking that he's intoxicated and unhygienic. Feeling embarrassed, Émile rises. Just then, a noise from the forest startles everyone. But despite this, the teenager walks towards the woods, which Nina notices. The next morning, the teenager awakens by the lake with blood in his mouth, unable to recall what happened to him the previous night. After spitting the red fluid out, he walks home, passing by an anti-mutant graffiti art. At his house, Émile rushes to the bathroom and discovers a feather inside his mouth. Upon examining it, he suspects that he must have eaten a bird. Later that day, François and his son venture into the restricted forest to look for Lana. During their conversation, Émile asks his dad how he felt when his mom started mutating. In response, the man explains he wasn't disgusted because he knows the creature is still his wife. When they don't find her in the woods, they spend the whole night searching during the drive. They call out for Lana while playing her favorite song at maximum volume. The next morning, Émile awakens, noticing a change in his nails. Suddenly, Albert jumps out the window, prompting the teenager to follow him to the woods. After finding his pet, he becomes distracted upon seeing a chameleon girl climbing a tree. Suddenly, the bird-like creature lunges at Émile, wounding the teenager's shoulder with his claws. However, the mutant stops his attack upon realizing his prey is like him too. At that moment, a furious François arrives. He threatens the creature and takes his son away from the forest. Noticing his injury, he attempts to bring him to a hospital, but the teenager points out that it's just a scratch. Their arguments interrupted when they almost hit a horse. Julia notices their arrival, explaining she's in the area because a mutant attacked the riding school. When the cop sees Émile's situation, the teenager lies to her, stating that his dog bit him. Because of this, the kind officer helps them meet the army nurse to stitch the wound. While the teenager gets treatment, Julia assures François that she's just there if he needs further help. Arriving home, Émile removes his stitches and licks the blood off his wound, disgusted by his animalistic behavior. This continues to manifest during science class. When the teenager notices a familiar feather in Nina's necklace, he impulsively grabs it, prompting his classmate to call him out. Émile then tries to resume his project. However, due to his enhanced hearing, he becomes distracted by the noisy ferrets in the cage. He yells at the animals, which shocks the whole class. On his way home, the teenager finds it difficult to ride the bike because of the changes in his body. Nina then becomes concerned, inviting him to her house. There, Émile gets a drink from the fridge but surprisingly finds a lifeless bird inside. Nina then explains that she had found it at her doorstep after the party, taking its feather for her necklace. Hearing this, the teenager quietly realizes he didn't eat the bird but offered it to his classmate as a gift. Nina then intends to donate the deceased animal as food for the mutants. This idea prompts Émile to catch a fish on the lake, which is witnessed by a woman. Afterward, he heads to the forest to give it to the Birdman. The teenager then tries to befriend the mutant, who introduces himself as Fix. The creature explains that it's a name he gave to himself because he forgot his real one. Nearby, the chameleon girl, Froggy, gets the other food and climbs back to the tree while eating it. Émile notices that Fix has a wounded back because of his failed attempts to fly. To help, the teenager recommends practicing elsewhere instead. He brings him to the lake where he removes all the branches to prevent the Birdman from obtaining injuries. Fix likes the idea, ultimately agreeing to practice there. As he leaves the forest, Émile tries to ride his bike. However, he keeps falling, which causes him to throw it out of frustration. Meanwhile, at the bar, François waits for his son's arrival and then interacts with Jacques, who shows him his anti-mutant t-shirt and laser light. After taking out the trash, the man notices a movement behind the hanging clothes, thinking it's Lana. To his surprise, another mutant appears behind him, pushing him to the ground. At that moment, the other creature runs away. Suddenly, Naïma arrives to stop the mutant with an oar, revealing that the creature is her little sister. François quickly realizes that his colleague has been hiding the mutant in a storeroom. He then helps Naïma guide the creature back to its spot. However, she suddenly panics, causing her to run into the front and scare the customers away. At that moment, François excuses himself to look for the other mutant, convinced that it's his wife. Suddenly, he spots a bear in the distance, realizing that Lana is now in her full form. However, the creature runs deeper into the woods instead of approaching her husband. Returning to the bar, François notices that the cops are there to find Naïma's sister. Later, he approaches Julia, informing her that he saw Lana. Seconds later, Émile finally arrives and reasons that his bike was stolen. While having lunch with his classmates the next day, the teenager suddenly spits out a tooth. When this weirds out the students, Émile lies, reasoning that it's his milk tooth. After class, the teenager watches Fix's flight practice, but the Birdman's attempts are unsuccessful. Following this, Émile treats his injuries and removes the cover on his friend's face, discovering the doctors gave him a corrective surgery to remove his beak. Émile then shares his protruding spine and growing wolf fur, which he finds itchy. That night, Julia accompanies François to look for Lana in the forest. However, whenever a police car passes by, they conceal themselves behind the bushes. As they continue their search, the man finds Émile's bicycle, prompting him to return it home. While washing his hands in the bathroom, François discovers the sink is clogged. Removing the pipe, he discovers a bundle of hair and small claws, making him realize that his son is mutating too. Later, he confronts Émile by showing him the claws and asking him to ride the bike. However, the teenager runs away instead of admitting the truth. The father soon catches his son and hugs him tightly, expressing his support and care. The next morning, François advises Émile to stick to his routine to prevent him from being institutionalized. When he sees Émile eating directly from the plate, he devises a plan to help control his impulsive behaviors by giving him Lana's medicine. Afterward, the concerned father checks his son's fangs and advises him to trim his nails daily. Next, he puts cotton inside his ears to lessen his sound sensitivity. Finally, he teaches him how to use a hair removal cream. Suddenly, they are interrupted when Julia picks up François to look for Lana in the woods. That night, Émile walks outside while speaking with Nina on the phone. He asks her to scream from her location, secretly testing if his enhanced hearing allows him to hear distant sounds. And to his surprise, it works perfectly. The next day, the teenager visits Fix, who has lost his human voice. Realizing that his friend can communicate only through bird sounds, he hugs him tightly, showing his support. He then promises to guide him to his ultimate transformation. Hearing this, Fix climbs up the tree to show the result of his constant practice, revealing that he can now fly. Seeing this, Émile feels proud of his friend. That night, the teenager attends a festival to help out his dad and his colleagues. However, learning that his son is in the area, François becomes furious because they agreed he should be hiding, leading to a physical altercation. Émile bites his father on the shoulder, but François slightly pushes scissors onto his neck, causing the teenager to let go of his dad. Following this, Émile walks away from his dad and runs into Nina, who invites him to stroll along the cornfield. There, the teens spend a romantic moment together. When Nina discovers that Émile has fur, she doesn't mind since she knows he's a mutant from the start. Upon returning to the festival, Émile heads to the bathroom. Victor, who saw him with Nina, confronts him with a device to confirm if he's a mutant. The teenager is then overwhelmed by the sound it produces, causing him to scratch his classmate. Soon, the locals and cops are alerted by the mutant's presence, and Émile has no choice but to hide in the cornfield. When a dog finds him, the teenager scares the animal away with his bark, but this only causes the armed men to shoot and the alarm to go off. Because of this, Émile starts running as gun people chase after him. At the same time, his dad also searches for him, worried about his safety. When someone's about to shoot Émile, Fix arrives just in time to stop it, ending the local with his claws. When François sees the body, he immediately takes the rifle and continues to look for his son. Meanwhile, Émile follows the Birdman to the woods while running from a police car. He soon arrives at the lake and crosses to the other side, causing his pursuer's vehicle to get stuck in the water. Despite this, the officers start shooting, and one of the bullets hits Fix. Seeing the Birdman fall, Émile immediately rushes to his friend, who passes away in his arms. He then leaves him there, And soon, François and the hunters discover the mutant's body. Due to the threatening presence of the creatures in town, the military initiates an operation to capture them. The next morning, Émile tries to survive in the woods by eating berries. That night, he climbs a tree and howls to communicate with the nocturnal creatures. The following day, the teenager grows more fur on his back, revealing that he's soon to be in his full form. When a storm hits that night, Émile takes shelter in a cave. The next morning, he exits the cave and encounters a bear, realizing the creature is his mother. Lana also recognizes her son, and they bump their foreheads, expressing their love. Lana then leaves, and Émile follows her deep into the woods where he discovers the other mutants living peacefully, including the chameleon girl. However, the happy creatures are suddenly interrupted when flares appear in the sky. Not long after, the army arrives and uses a sound device to overwhelm the creature's senses. As a result, Émile and the others are captured, except for the chameleon girl who uses her camouflage to conceal herself. At the police station, François encounters Julia, who leads him to his son. There, the protective father convinces the officer that Émile was in the woods due to intoxication and had no intentions of interfering with a military operation. However, when the teenager is about to sign the release document, he accidentally rips it because his hand can't hold the pen properly. When the cop prints a new one for him, Émile fails to hide his true identity and growls at the man. Quick on his feet, François pushes the officer. Then, he stamps the document and shows it to the other cops to finally take his son out of the police station. Following this, François and Émile leave town. On the road, the teenager informs his dad that he met his mom in the woods. Further in their conversation, they reminisce about a ski trip when they were still complete as a family. However, their beautiful moment is interrupted when François realizes the cops are chasing them. The father then accelerates, promising his son that he won't be institutionalized. After hitting a barrier and reaching the forest, François opens the passenger door for his son, encouraging him to flee and live a peaceful life in the woods. For the last time, a teary-eyed Émile holds his dad's arm, appreciating his acceptance for him. He then runs as fast as he can. As he goes deeper into the woods, he howls proudly, embracing his newfound freedom.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.